on this computer. Well, good afternoon and welcome to this edition of the Coach's Call. My name is Chris Whelan. I'm Director of the Wellington Centre of Business Excellence, based in Wellington, New Zealand, and operating right across the country. We help business owners and executives fulfill their ambitions, improve their productivity and profitability, and of course, develop great teams and systems. We keep them on track in the same way a great sports coach builds great teams. And what we work on is their focus, their certainty, their accountability, so they can really enjoy what they do, make more money, and actually get fun back and get the return on investment that their effort deserves. The Coach's Call is our way of showcasing the best of local business. Each week we meet with a local business owner and talk to them about their insights, what's happening in their industry, what's happening in their business. That's what we're about today, and I'm absolutely delighted to have Fraser Carson, the Director of Flightdec Connected Communities, as my guest today. Fraser, welcome to the Coach's Call.
Thanks, Chris.
It's great to have you here. And I guess by way of kicking off, we've known each other now for 5 or 6 years and have worked together. So I'd like to maybe just start by asking you a couple of questions. You are obviously building this connected communities. I'd like to know a little bit about who you are and what your background is and what brought you along. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I'm a Kiwi born and bred, and my early working life was actually as a graphic designer,
Right.
working in television. Here in the UK, I worked for the BBC for a couple of years. I came back and worked in advertising as an art director, doing television commercials and ads and things, and then became much more interested in how communications worked. Mm-hmm. So therefore marketing and so on and so forth. So by the late 80s, I'd set up my own business and partnership, which we grew rapidly. And then there was a downturn in the early 90s, and it was a partnership that I didn't want to be in. So then I went and worked as a general manager in a big ad agency here and set up our business, the first iteration of which was in 1993. So I've been running a business since then. I suppose the thing that I'm about is that I'm a creator. I like to look at problems in the world and how to solve them. And having been trained as a designer, I'm imbued with the idea of design thinking, which is solving problems in the world. And that's what we're doing in our business now, which is really for the last 10 years has been a slow burn startup, creating websites that talk to each other essentially, which means that we can address a lot of the issues that are happening in the world around unreliable digital sharing of communications through Google search and social media and so on, where we've developed this to happen through real websites. And it's working, but it is early days in terms of the critical mass. But I wake up every morning kind of thinking about the issues and the problems that we're trying to solve and continuing on a relentless pathway to try and solve them.
Fantastic. I mean, that's incredible. So you've been, just to pick on that, you've been in business since 93. So we're talking practically 30 years, heaps and heaps of experience. And you've just given me a great segue to the next question I was going to ask you, which is, what does your business do? How does it differ? You said it's different than Google and things like that. How does Flightdec Connected Communities compete or do things differently than what everyone understands, the Facebooks of the world?
Yeah, well, if you go back to the early days of the internet, basically it provided the ability for individual businesses and organizations and individuals to set up websites. So you essentially had what I call sparks in the dark, separate websites sitting out there in the Milky Way, if you like, stars separated from each other. And that's the way it is still today, except that what's happened in the meantime is that social media has come along, Facebook, LinkedIn, so on and so forth. And each of those things is just one website. And so the way that connects people up is that you go to the platform, you set up your LinkedIn page or your Facebook page, and you can instantly share information with each other. Google basically is one way that those sparks in the dark separated websites can be found, because Google basically trawls for the digital footprint that that websites generate.
Mhm.
And that's how you find websites through Google search and so on.
Right.
The problem with all of this is that we've anticipated for a long, long time is that Google and social media and so on use popularity algorithms, because that's how those corporations make money. If your content becomes popular and it's targeted, then they can make money out of it, and you can make money out of it because you're targeting all the time. If you want to get to left-handed shopkeepers in Newtown,
Right.
you pretty much target those people.
Right.
The problem with that all is that it's open slather. It becomes a digital sugar environment where that targeting also creates information bubbles. It's fertile ground for content mills, which are basically factories producing misinformation, bad information, pretty much terrible stuff. That's the environment within which we live. So the short answer to your question, Chris, is that the world is still full of websites that are sparks in the dark. And what we've done is to say, well, let's create an alternative space where those websites can share content with each other without having to go through the digital, the popularity search engines. So you can just join groups of websites, and you can literally post an event, a blog, or an article and share it between yourselves. That creates opportunities to create communities and clusters of websites that can share reliable, trustworthy information.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about that. So when I work with my clients, I often they want to do a bit of marketing or something. They want to change how they're doing things. They want to do things differently or better. If I say to them, actually, you should be speaking to Fraser Carson at Flightdec Connected Communities, how will they share their information with a different website? How do they go about that?
Well, the technology that we've developed is new technology. It has things that conventional websites don't have.
Right. Okay.
So inevitably, people will say, "Well, I've got a conventional website. How can we have what you're offering?" And I say, "Well, you might have had a radio receiver, and then you want a TV set. How does your radio work like a TV set? It doesn't. It's new technology." Okay. It's like if you've got a horse and cart and you want a motor car, you have to buy the motor car. So it's new technology. Right. Some people might think of that as being a bit of a negative, but that's the way new technology always works. There's a process that people go through. I'm always minded by new technology has this effect. Apparently Ford, when they were thinking about introducing a key start, ignition start for cars, of people, and people said, "No, I like to crank the car because it's good exercise, and I know that the car will start every time." Right. You would think that people wouldn't adopt the new technology based on that little bit of research, but in fact, we now know that that was never the case. Whoever invented the light bulb, was it Edison?
Edison, yeah.
No, I use candles. Why would I need this?
Yeah, that's a great example. And if I think where the cars have got to now, a lot of them haven't got keys anymore. They've got push buttons. Yeah. I
think these things can happen quickly or slowly. When they created the email out of the invention of the internet, right, very few people thought that email would catch hold. Were they right? No. Being connected and being able to communicate, and a lot of people are having conversations about the bad stuff that's going on in terms of communication, because people thought that the internet automatically would democratize society and it would create a better informed society. If anybody says that that's true and that we have more social cohesion and a fairer and better informed society, is not on the money.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, your comment about email, I recall the first time I used it, and I'm trying to think what it was. Pegasus Mail, I think it was. But I'm probably dating myself if I start talking about Pegasus Mail. Fraser, tell me, over the last 30 years or something, what's the greatest, I mean, you've spoken about connected people and doing things differently, but what's the greatest lesson you've learned over that period of time?
Well, I think there's, I mean, one quick one is that if you believe what you're doing, and you really have to think this through, because you should abandon it if it's not going to work and you don't really believe it. If you believe in what you're doing, you should be relentless. And so that's one characteristic that I have. I might get a lot of things wrong. I get a few things right, but I'm relentless about what I believe is correct. The other thing that I think is true is that we live in a real world which actually is based on, sort of natural biology and physics, if you like. And I think that sometimes we create these artificial realities at our peril. So I often think about the idea that if we're doing something in the digital space, it's actually less about the digital technology and much more about the way that human beings believe and interact with each other. And I think that is something that is unchanged in most respects. Human needs and the problems that the world faces, people have basic needs like the need for food, the need for love, the need for security, the need for trust. Those things don't change. But as the world has evolved and it's become kind of more digital and a bit more artificial,
right,
become distorted, I think. And I think every day what we need to do is just take breath and think about what basic human needs are looking for and how, as businesses, we can answer those basic human needs rather than contriving things. For example, the way communities actually work is that there are natural moderations to activity in normal villages and communities. So communities don't tolerate bad behavior beyond a certain point. If there are large numbers of people who are tolerating bad behavior, then we have a breakdown in social cohesion. And I think to some extent that's what we're seeing. And that sadly is being induced by this sort of artificial digital sugar popularity algorithm thing, where people are being influenced really heavily about, with misinformation and stuff that gets people doubting authority.
Right.
We shouldn't be blindly following what authority tells us to do. But, this pandemic, for example, is war. People are dying as a result. In the US, 2,000 people a day are dying still. 2,000 people a day. So that means the only response that a government can take to that is to say, let's work together and let's do our best to defeat it.
Right.
But the misinformation is saying, don't trust that. We should actually just do our own thing. The hell with the government. So, I think that's the thing when we abandon at our peril the idea that community cohesion is less important than individual freedoms and rights. Wow. Otherwise, it becomes a real difficult situation. I don't know what that has to do with the way that we run businesses. I think we all have a responsibility, whether we're in business or in the community sector, to be contributing to social cohesion, because it's going to be how we recover from this pandemic, and it's going to be how we can make a better world for business and for everybody.
Well, that is that's pretty comprehensive, and that's interesting as well, Fraser. From a I mean, obviously I'm a business coach, but that's interesting because regardless of whether you're in business or whether you're in the social sector or something else, we're all facing, even if we aren't in the same boat, we're facing the same storm, and that building the social cohesion strikes me as massively important. I wanted to ask you one or two more questions before we wrap up, and one of them is, you've been in business, as we said earlier, 30 some years. What, if any, failures have shaped your life, and how's that made you? I mean, I'm throwing this at you because I know that you've built a couple of businesses, but how has failure, mistakes, things you've done wrong, how's that influenced your life? How's that shaped where you are today?
I think as a business person, it's useful because it makes you humble.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that the biggest planning that you can do in business is actually planning to be lucky. So I know people sort of say that they make their own luck, but where I've been really successful in business, and I've been unsuccessful a couple of times as well. I have no worries about that in the sense because I would hope that I've been able to learn from those situations. Mm-hmm. But where I've been really successful, the biggest ingredient was good luck.
Right.
I had to position myself in both of those cases to be able to harvest that good luck. But if certain things hadn't happened that were really in the lap of the gods, I wouldn't have been successful. I just had to be, it's a little bit like when you get to spring and you say, well, there are going to be a few sunny days this summer. I would hope so. But if you're in Wellington and you said, I'm going to get 40 sunny days, maybe you're stretching your luck. But it sort of works a bit like that. But I think if you're talking about failure, the philosophy that I have around these things is that in good times, you're banking it. I'm not just talking about money in the bank. I think you're banking the good times, the good luck, emotionally as well, because inevitably there's going to be some tough times come. And it seems to me that you draw on the good times and bad times.
Absolutely.
Emotionally, financially, and in all sorts of other ways. For example, I've always been a big networker. There's a lot of people that I know. I see people, even if I don't think very often that they're going to provide me with a short-term business opportunity. But because I'm networked, I've got all sorts of people who are out there. And when times get tough, that's the time that you can go back and say, hey, look, this is a problem that I need to solve. Can you help me with this? Have you got some thoughts and ideas? And people are happy to do that.
That's sorry,
yeah.
Kieran.
Well, especially if it's not a transactional thing either. It's not like I go to people and say, hey, do you remember that favor that I did 2 years ago? I need a favor from you.
But that's a great lesson though, isn't it, Fraser? I mean, right there, what I'm hearing you say is that even though you're a business person, even though you've been around for a long time in New Zealand and Wellington and the UK, it's still about relationships that you're holding. It's not just a transaction A for B. Yeah,
I think as long as you've got relationships, good relationships, know who your friends are. That it is money in the bank in terms of those times when you and it's also if somebody gives you a call and they say, hey, look, can I have a chat because I'm going through a bit of a tough time? Of course you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, agreed.
And that's why I say it's not transactional. It's more, it's to me, community, trust, connectivity. They're the keys.
Well, I had one or two other questions, but I'm going to finish on one final question, and that really is, how can I add value to you? What can I do to support your business?
Chris, as my business mentor and coach, we've become mates. So the reason that the value, I think, is that you're all care and no responsibility about my business, and that's what I value in the sense that I can have the conversation and you can give me a response. If there was one word for it, it's the ability to listen. And just be able to analyze. The more value for me comes from stuff that I might share with you, that you respond with, have you thought of this? Or what you seem to be saying is 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'll say, well, not quite, but, So I think being in business very often can feel, especially a small business and a startup business in particular, where you basically walked out onto the end of the plank and basically said, I'm bloody stark naked, I'm at the end of the plank, I'm vulnerable as heck, I've got to make this work. So it's pretty lonely. And having somebody to talk to and somebody who can be a bit of a mentor, and you can sort of call up at any time and say, hey, look, I've got this idea. Do you think it's really stupid or not? I've talked to a few people. What do you think? Invaluable. So, yeah.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, there you know, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time coming on the Coach's Call, Fraser. And, you know, to everyone listening to this, I'm going to load this up onto my YouTube channel. I'll put it onto my website. I would certainly encourage you to connect with Fraser directly go to flightdec.com and have a chat with him if there's anything that struck you and that you want to find out more about. Fraser's a great guy, local business person here in Wellington. And Fraser, I just want to summarize what I heard you say in terms of some lessons. If you believe in something, be absolutely relentless about it. And that's a great lesson for all of us, particularly in these COVID times. Be relentless and I guess be resilient. The other one is that even though we're in a digital world and you and I are talking to each other on Zoom, it's still very much about personal relationships. It's not a transaction. Yes, we're in business and yes, we want to do good things, but it's about personal relationships. And then the final one, which is what you said to me about, you know, listening and actually being active in listening. For those that are listening, those that are watching this video, thank you so much. We'll try and bring this out every week. Fraser, I look forward to keeping in touch and thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.